Before we begin texture painting, there's a few things we need to do to set up our interface to make it easier for us to work. The first thing I'm going to do is change from the Cycles render engine to the Blender internal. Now the Cycles render engine is the newer and I think more realistic render engine. However, the texture painting tools in the Blender internal are still more robust and user-friendly, I think. The next thing I want to do is change the way we view the shading in the viewport here. So I'm going to press the N key on the keyboard to bring up our Properties panel. And I'm going to scroll down to the shading area. And here I'm going to change from multi-texture to GLSL. That will just allow us to be able to see our paint in the viewport. I'm just going to hit the N key again to close that panel. And now we need to add a light to the scene. We need to be able to see the model as we paint on it. So I'm going to come over here to the Create tab and scroll down and add a Hemi Light. So I'll just click Hemi and there's the light in the scene. Just want to bring this up and move it to one side, maybe bring it up to the front a bit. And I'll just hit the R key and rotate it and try and point it at the model here. There we go. So now that we have a light in the scene, I want to change the viewport shading method as well. So down here in the viewport shading menu, I'm going to change from solid to texture. And once I do that, the model here turns black, and that's okay. We're going to add a new material to it now. So I'll just select the hammer head. We have a few different objects here that make up the high resolution hammer. I'll just choose the hammer head, and now I'm going to come over here to the materials area, right here. And I want to get rid of this test pattern I created for UV mapping. So I'll just hit the minus key here. And now I'll click New, and let's call this new material Hammer. Now we can see our new material on the hammerhead. That's good. Now to be able to paint on the objects, we're going to switch from object mode to texture paint. And over here on the left you can see the texture paint panel. We're going to need to add a texture paint slot here. You can see it says missing texture slots. So I'll add a paint slot. And we have quite a few choices here. We can choose to select the diffuse color, specular, normal. Those are the main ones we're going to be using, but for now I'm going to choose diffuse color. And here it gives me an opportunity to choose how big I want the diffuse color map. So I'm going to change this from 1024 to 2048 just to make it a little bit bigger. And I'll click OK. And now you can see we have this black material, or this black texture, on our hammerhead. Now I want to point something out real quick. Over here in the Slots tab, you can see that this slot is called Hammer Diffuse Color. If I come over here to the Texture panel, right next to the Material panel, you can see that this texture layer is called Diffuse Color. Now, these are actually the same thing. So what I like to do is just make sure that the name here is the same as the texture slot over here. Now the last thing I want to do for this video is create a new screen layout. We're going to need our screen layout to be a little bit different than most other ones. So I'm going to come up here to the screen layout menu and click the plus sign here. And I'll just call this texture painting. And I'll add a new window by clicking on this little corner tab and dragging it over to the right. And now I want to change this window from the 3D view to the UV image editor. And I'll just click here. And now you can see we've got the UV map of the hammer visible. But we need to bring up that hammer diffuse color map in the UV image editor here so that we can paint on it. So I'll click on the little pull-out menu here and choose that hammer diffuse color. And there is that color map that we're going to begin painting onto. So in the next video we'll begin laying down the base colors of our hammer. Well, now that we have our screen layout set up the way we want, let's go ahead and add the material to our other objects. So I'll just come over here to the hammer accessories object, and I'll come over to the materials panel, and instead of this test pattern again, I'll just change this here from test pattern to hammer. And I'll do the same thing for the handle. Let's also switch that one. With that done, let's go back to the hammer head and let's work on that for a minute. And with texture paint mode selected here, I'll go ahead and just click and draw on the hammer, and you can see I can just draw a paint stroke directly on it. And as I do, you can see that it appears over here in the UV map. And you can see that really we're drawing directly on this hammer diffuse color canvas that we created. I'll go ahead and undo that with Control or Command Z. But the thing to remember here is that this image canvas is saved as a completely separate entity from the Blender scene file. So if you come down here to the image menu, you can see there's an asterisk here. And that means that this particular image has not yet been saved to our hard drive. You have to save the image files here separately from the Blender scene file. So if I were to save this Blender scene file, I can come up here to File, Save Scene, and I can press Control or Command S to save the scene. But if I want to save the image, I need to come down here to Image and click on Save Image, this Alt S. So if I click this, it will then save the image to my hard drive, and I get rid of that asterisk. So you have to remember when you're working with texture painting in Blender, you have to save twice. You have to save once for the scene file using Control or Command S, and then you also have to save once for the image file using Alt S. So to continue painting on our model, we should come over here and take a look at the brush settings. Over here we can adjust the color of the brush, we can adjust the radius or the size of the brush right here, and we can also adjust the strength of the brush here. Now there are shortcut keys as well. We can press the F key to adjust the size of the brush, and we can press Shift F to then adjust the strength. So if I pull it out, the strength decreases, and if I push it in, I increase the strength. Now we can come through here and paint on the hammer and try and fill the color of the hammer up by just painting on it. And while that's possible, it's probably not as efficient as we'd like. I'm going to press Command Z to get rid of these. What I'd like to do is just fill this whole piece with just a base color. And to do that, I'm going to bring the color back to the center of the color wheel here, and I'm going to bring this down so it's really kind of more of a silver. And I have my strength up to 100%. Now to fill this, what I can do is use this little button right down here, this face selection masking. And if I turn that on, you can see the wireframe of the low poly mesh overlaid onto the hammer. Now I can select individual faces on the hammer by just clicking here, or holding the Shift key down and selecting multiple faces. Now when I paint, you can see I can paint within this selected area, but if I try and go off of that area, it won't let me paint. I'll undo that again. But here's the real benefit of this. I'll hit the A key to deselect that area. And what I can do is press the L key. I can hover over this area and press the L key, and that will select the entire piece. Now I can come over here and select the fill brush. I need to reset my color back to that silver because the color changed when I changed brushes. And I'll increase the strength again. But now if I come over here and hover over this object and I click, now it fills that entire selected area with my selected color. Now that's a lot easier. And this is a great way to go through all the pieces of the object and lay down a base color for all of them. But now you may find that if you click here on the icon for the brush, that you don't have a fill brush. And that sometimes happens with certain installs of Blender. So let me just show you how you can create one of your own before we move on. To create a new brush, you can just come in here and click on the plus icon. I'll just click plus. And you can give it a name. I'll just call this Fill 2. And then you can come down here to the brush menu, and under Image Paint Tools, you can change what type of brush this new brush is. So I could change this to a draw brush, or I could change it to a smear, or a fill. Now the last thing I should do before I move on is come over here and save this image. You can see it has an asterisk here. So what I need to do is just press Alt-S and save that image. You can see it says saved image up here. I'd like to continue laying down the base colors for the model, but instead of just using the color wheel to select colors, I'd actually like to sample colors off of an image. Now I've found an image online through Google Images. I can't supply it because of copyright, but you can go out and search for any kind of image that you want and sample colors off it. So let me show you how we do that. First of all, here in my texture painting screen layout, I'm going to click on this little corner tab right here and drag it down to create a new window. And this is where I'll put my image. Let me open this up just a little bit, and I can get to this open image icon here. If I click this, I can browse to where I've stored my image. And here it is. I can click on this little button here to display the actual image. And I'll select it and just click Open Image. So here it is now, but the UV wires are overlaying it. I'll just go to View and turn off Draw Texture Paint UVs. And there we go. Now to be able to sample this, I'm going to need to change this from View to Paint. And then if I zoom in here and go to, say, this area here, I can hover over the image and press the S key. And if I then click, it will then sample that image. Now maybe I should go over here to something a little bit brighter. I'll try this right here. Now once I have that color, you can see it's created a new palette here for that specific color. You can create new palettes here with the plus sign, but it's already created a new palette for me. So I can select this, come over here to the hammer, and click it, and it will fill it with that color. So let's say I'm not happy with that and I want to try maybe something like this. I'll press S, click, select that palette, and click on the hammer. So that's just a way to be able to sample colors off of an image. And of course you can always come back in and tweak any of the colors that you have to get them just the way you want. So maybe I can, say, select that and click it again and lay down that color. Now let's use the wood here to sample some color and lay it down on the wood here of our hammer. I'm going to narrow this down just a bit, and I'll zoom in to our handle. And I'll select the handle over here in the outliner. And in addition, I'm going to go ahead and hide the accessories and, the hammer head as well. So we just can see the handle. And if I zoom in here, you can see that the wood portion of our hammer is up here, and the part that we hope to be leather is down here. I'm going to turn on the face masking button down here, and now I can select individual faces that I want to paint or fill. To select multiple faces at once, I can use the Circle Select tool. So I'll just press the C key, and now I can click and drag and select multiple faces here. I'll just go right down to about there. And then I'm going to tumble around to the other side and use the Circle Select tool once again and select those. So now I'll come over here and hold the S key down and see if I can find a nice wood color, one that I think could work pretty well here. Maybe something like that. And I'll select it, and then click over here on the model. Now to deselect those faces, I'll go ahead and press the A key. And then I'll go through the process down here of selecting the faces for the leather part of the handle. Now I'll hover over the image here and press the S key and see if I can find a nice leather color in here and click. I'll select that palette and then click on the handle. And there we go. Let me turn this face selection off, and I'll bring back the other pieces. So you can see how we're beginning to get some nice colors from our sampled image. I'm going to go ahead and sample some more colors for the rest of the hammer. And in the next video, we'll talk about adding texture slots for new texture paint layers.